Dan's finally getting some answers. I mean, he's been sitting here wondering.
20 years. I've been wondering, where did she go?
Why?
Congratulations on the show.
Thank you.
I loved it.
Great.
Only criticism. I wish I could have seen more.
You do want to know, like,
I want to
what
know
happens.
what happens.
Like, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because you spend so many hours just like, you want that point.
Willing that moment. Yeah, you're willing it to happen. I'm not. Yeah, we can't spoil it though. But yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see what happens.
Had you guys read the book?
No, neither of us had actually.
Yeah.
I used the book later on while we were shooting, sort of like a Bible, just to see if I could find anything in there that gives me a little bit more of the inner workings of Alison's mind. But no, for us it was the screenplay.
Do you think that people who have read the book, will they be like happy with this adaptation? Like, is it quite true to it, or?
It's always hard, isn't it, when you know a book and you love a book and it's sort of your own version in your head. You know, it's always hard to sort of translate that onto screen. And I do believe there's been some changes, and a lot of, you know, the music and even the time period, I believe, is different. So I hope they just take it on as a new version of the story. You know, I think so. But yeah, I don't know the book particularly well. I was similar to Teresa. I would sort of dive in and look for little clues and stuff about the character. But yeah, God, I hope they like it. I hope they get into it. Yeah.
Rory Walton-Smith and Florence Hunt, who fans might know from Bridgerton, play the younger versions of Daniel and Alison. Did you guys get to work together much?
No.
No.
They were cast when we had already almost wrapped our stuff. So yeah, it was interesting. They had a harder time than us, I think, in terms of we had already established these characters, and then they have to come in and, in a way, like, find, like, all right, what's that thread that binds these people? And that's a harder place to be in. But Lucy Gaffey, our director, obviously had been working with us and had seen what we were doing with these characters and helped them breathe life into the younger versions. You did have a bit of a...
I was really, like, Lucy sort of let me in on some of the audition process. I think I think that they'd sort of found their young Alison, and they were sort of looking more for the Daniel character. So she did. I mean, she's so beautifully collaborative that she sent me a load of the audition tapes and said, you know, who are you feeling who are you kind of connecting with as the younger version of yourself? And for me, it was sort of Rory straight away. I mean, there was some great performances, but there was just something about him. There was a sort of poetry to him. There was a sort of vulnerability and a gentleness that I sort of really kind of responded to. So yeah, but like I said, you know, they sort of had to come on. And Rory, it's his first job, you know, it's the first acting job he's ever sort of had. So he came and he was really keen to sort of really do the best he could. And he came onto the set and he was watching the monitor and watching some of the scenes that I was working on. And, you know, and he definitely brought some of that into his performance, you know. But I think T's right, you know, it's like Lucy was the sort of tonal pilot of the whole thing, and she knew what she needed to find in order to make these characters sort of feel like the same person, you know.
Was there ever any discussion, Teresa, for you to do an accent?
There was a lot of discussions. We kind of flip-flopped. In fact, it wasn't until the day before we started shooting that we realised actually it's best if she's dropped the accent altogether. I had worked with a dialect coach for 6 weeks on doing like my Mondays and my, you know, my little words. And then they had said initially a light Sheffield. And then we did the read through and then we realised, like, if we're trying to sell the fact that she's completely changed her life and shapeshifted and is running away from her past, wouldn't she have been trying to take on the persona of Mossman mother, you know, wealthy doctor husband, and she's wants nothing to do with Sheffield, so she's dropped the accent. And then I was thinking about my own family who are all from England, they're all from Surrey, and they all sound Australian. So I was like, okay, I think we can figure this out. And we did have ideas of like pulling in the accent for certain scenes, but then we talked about it as well and we're like, do you know what? It's just not going to work.
It doesn't work, yeah.
And then
also,
you make the
your
joke.
husband, I think, would have wanted you to have, he was pulling you away from that world, and
Yeah.
you know, would have tried to sort of, you know, shift you into
Oh, that one
into his
sounded
world.
Sheffield,
Yeah, yeah.
Alison. No.
You need to lose that.
Let's try that
common
again.
English accent.
No.
What about for you, the accent? Was it?
It's a hard accent. It's a really hard accent. People have the misconception that because it's an English accent and I'm from England that it's easy, but I think anytime you do an accent that isn't your own, whether it's even in the same region of where you live, if it's a completely different way of how you speak, you have to put a lot of work into it, you know. My wife's family are from Bradford, from Yorkshire, so they have that accent. So they were all like, "Come on, let's hear your accent," and I was like, "No,
That's
no,
harder.
no, 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 no,
I
no."
feel like getting
Yeah.
judged.
So I know I'm waiting for this to come out for them all to see it before I get crucified by her family. But yeah, no, we did. And everyone on board, because there was a lot of people that weren't from Sheffield, and it was really, really, really important that we tried to make that as authentic as possible. And I think everybody did a really good job. Everyone worked hard on that.
I think with this story, as with a lot, there are obviously things that stopped them, but you kind of feel like if you just had a little bit better communication,
Always.
this could have been
Always.
helped.
Yeah.
What advice would you give Daniel and Alison if you could?
Younger version of
Younger.
Daniel and Alison. Oh, it's so hard because Alison is so shrouded in the pain of her life. But I think her intuition tells her that Dan is safe and that he could be someone to really lean on and to really help pull her out of what she's having to navigate at such a young age. So I guess my advice would be like lean into that love and crack open and communicate, and don't be afraid to fall because he will catch you.
Maybe if he'd have put a different song on a mixtape, that might have convinced her to stay. Who knows? I don't know what song that might have been that would have made her not leave. I don't know.
He tried.
He tried. I do, and I think that's the heartbreaking thing about it, is that they're clearly in love and they're clearly having this experience together, and life sort of pulls them away in a really sort of traumatic way, but they're not doing anything wrong. No one's pushing, it's circumstantial and it's heartbreaking,
Yeah. What was your favourite episode to shoot, and which one are you most excited for fans to see?
I think the most fulfilling one for fans is going to be when these two come together, and they're going to explore this flirtation. I mean, they at this point, when you see them in the show, lines are crossed. I mean, they're both married, and it's first of all just starts with sending the songs, but that cracks open something within both of them, and it's very unresolved, and they need to come together to just explore what that is. So I quite liked shooting all of that stuff when they're really like conversing about the past and what happened, and Dan's finally getting some answers. I mean, he's been sitting here wondering.
20 years. I've been
So
wondering,
long.
where did she go? For
Why?
20 years?
Yeah, why?
Yeah, I felt the same. For me, it was like, the fun thing for both of us was that we had our individual stories. Teresa's was in Australia and mine was, we shot our stuff in Dublin. And we both got to kind of be a guest in each other's worlds, So I got to go to Sydney and shoot some stuff and sort of come into her life. And then the opposite,
Shake
UK,
things up.
shake things up a bit, and vice versa, Then there was my life and my world, and then Teresa's character Alison turns up in my world too. So it was fun, sort of crossing worlds.
What was it like for you shooting here? Had you spent much time here before?
I'd been here on a holiday sort of 20 years before in my sort of youth with a mate of mine. I didn't remember much of it, to be honest, other than a few sort of bars and hostels. But
Why didn't you remember?
20 years ago, that should be held near and dear.
Yeah, exactly, right, exactly. I think I was going through a breakup at the time.
Oh,
I think that's why I
gosh.
kind of
Oh,
came.
the turmoil.
I ran to Australia for 3 weeks. But it's one of the joys of the job, especially when there's iconic places in cities that you've never been to before, or you're visiting and you're there and you're shooting a film or a TV show and you're acting out a scene in an iconic sort of landscape that you've only seen on TV or whatever. And so to be on Bondi Beach shooting a scene felt, it's always one of those special sort of moments. That's the great part of doing the job that we do, definitely.